before I request our chief guest to deliver the third Yashvesh Shastri Memorial Lecture, I would like to inform you all that we started Yashvesh Shastri Memorial Lectures in the year 2019. The first speaker who gave the first memorial lecture was Dr. Vijay Pal Singh on the designing future rice for enhanced profitability and nutritional security during the year 2019 December. And then it was followed by a second Yashvesh Shastri Memorial Lecture during 2020 by Dr. D.V. Sheshu. He was former global coordinator of INJER and also a famous rice breeder at International Rice Research Institute. He gave a talk on strategic networking for global rice genetic enhancement during the December 2020. Now we have our Honorable Deputy Director General Dr. T.R. Sharma, Chief Guest of today's function. He would be delivering the third memorial lecture on the rice improvement, new breeding technologies. Before I invite him, I would also like to request our dignitaries in the dais to kindly reserve their remarks because Chief Guest has some important preoccupied activities. Therefore, he would like to complete his remarks first, and then we will have the remarks by the dignitaries sitting on the dais, Dr. B.N. Singh, Dr. Anand Kumar, and Dr. K. Krishnaya. And then for the benefit of the audience and who are online and who are sitting in this auditorium, I would like to give very brief introduction about Dr. T.R. Sharma, Tilak Raj Sharma, well-known plant molecular biologist. He is presently leading the Indian agriculture sector as Deputy Director General Crop Sciences ICAR, Government of India. Further, he contributed in the establishment and development of several prominent Indian institutions like National Agri-Food Technology Institute, Maholi, Center of Innovative and Applied Bioprocessing as CEO, National Institute of Plant Biotechnology as Project Director, and Indian Institute of Agricultural Biotechnology as OSD. Dr. Sharma is a postdoctorate had training in the genome analysis and bioinformatics at University of Alberta, Edmonton, Canada, and Krafft Spring Harbor Laboratory in New York, USA. And he had PhD from Palampur. For his outstanding research contributions, Dr. Sharma has been awarded various awards like University Gold Medal and then Certificate of Honor in PhD, Young Scientist Award of NAS during 1998, ICAR Young Scientist Award in Crop Sciences during 1999, Professor Umakant Sinha Memorial Award in Biochemistry and Biophysics and Biotechnology, Indian Science Congress Association. The awards list goes on. It's a very big list. And Dr. Sharma is a fellow of several national academies like Indian National Science Academy, Indian Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Agricultural Sciences. His major research interests in the areas of genomics and plant disease resistance. Dr. Sharma has contributed extensively to the improvement of rice for over 30 years and cloned a new rice blast gene, resistant gene, that is PI54, very widely employed in developing blast resistant varieties all over the country. And then he has been associated with the decoding of complete genomics of rice, tomato, pigeon pea, jute, mango, tea, and many plant pathogens. Dr. Sharma has guided more than 25 PhD students in agricultural biotechnology. He has published more than 180 research papers, have 4 patents, and associated in the development of 3 blast-resistant rice varieties, Pusa 1637 and Pusa Samba and HBR 2880. Dr. Sharma is the present Deputy Director General of Crop Sciences at ICAR. Sharma ji, may I now request you to kindly deliver the Chief Guest address and also the third memorial lecture of Yashvesh Shastri, Rice Improvement, New Breeding Technologies. Dr. Sharma, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to all. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Distinguished participants, guests, ladies and gentlemen, our honorable guest sitting on the dais, my former colleague Anand Kumar, former director, Central Rice Research Institute, Dr. B.N. Singh, present director of Indian Institute of Rice Research, Dr. R.M. Sundaram, my colleague, Dr. Himanshu Pathak, director, National Institute for Abiotic Stress Management, Honorable Vice Chancellor, who has just left for other meeting, Dr. Parveen Rao, distinguished directors from different ICAR institutes, former directors of Indian Institute of Rice Research, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my heartiest congratulations to the Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad, and all my colleagues, rice community sitting here in this particular meeting for the 7th Foundation Day of the Institute. It's a very, very important occasion, and as told by Dr. Pathak, it's an occasion which we should celebrate, enjoy ourselves throughout the day, and also do introspection, what we have done and what we have not done, what we could achieve or what we could not achieve, and then lay foundation for doing work in coming years. At this particular occasion, I would like to extend my heartiest congratulations to all the scientists of Indian Institute of Rice Research who were associated in developing 9 varieties during the past 1 year, which were released by CBRC, and many other contributions which were narrated by Dr. Sundaram in his welcome address and speech. It's really an occasion where I was interested to come personally to join Hyderabad in this particular occasion. But you know, because of Corona restrictions and some other commitment here, I could not come. And I thought that thoughts and few points related to rice research through online. And I would like to thank Dr. Sundaram and his team for inviting me to deliver the 3rd SVS Shastri Memorial Lecture on this Foundation Day, on the occasion of this Foundation Day. So for delivering that Foundation Lecture, I would like to share my screen now, and let me see whether it will work or not. Is my screen visible, Dr. Sundaram? Okay. So, but there is problem, I think. Yes. First of all, I would like to pay my tributes to Padma Shri Dr. SVS Shastri, who was a very distinguished rice scientist, and his contributions have already been told by Dr. Subba Rao. And also we have seen a small video about his life and the science which he has done during his academic career. The most important contributions which I could see here is the development of very high yielding variety, namely Jaya, which is still considered as a mega variety of rice. Besides other contributions, I would say that Dr. SVS Shastri has devoted his life to rice research in the country. And this lecture I would like to dedicate to this great personality of rice community who has done a great job to the rice research in India and abroad. So the topic which I chose for today's deliberation is rice improvement, new breeding technology. And the reason for choosing this particular topic is very obvious that I myself is working on rice research for the past more than 30 years. And as told by Dr. Subbarao, we could contribute to the development of different technologies besides cloning a gene for blast resistance PI54, which has already been introgressed in various varieties of rice. So that was the reason that I love this particular field. And you won't imagine if I deliver 100 lectures in a year, 95% would be on rice. Because I love this type of work and because of my association with this particular field. We know that India is a very diverse country with a population of more than 1.36 million.
I would like to request about...
Pardon? Am I not audible? Hello?
Sir, you are audible, sir. You are audible, sir. You are perfectly audible.
There was some request from the dais. I don't know. It's the 7th largest country in the world of 3.288 million square kilometers. And we have longest, very long coastal line. Agriculture accounts for 16.5% of India's gross domestic product, and nearly half the population in the country depends on farm-based income and providing livelihood to the farm community. We know that rice is one of the most important food security crops. And if we see the basic statistics about rice, it's globally planted on 150 million hectares with a total production of 503 million metric tons, which is produced annually. And this year, India has produced 118 million metric tons of rice. During the course of rice production and looking at various statistics, we know that rice contributes about 50% to world security. It occupies 44 million hectares area of land, which comes around 22% of the total crop area. And it's the source of livelihood for millions of Indians. But on the other hand, the productivity of rice is 2.72 tons per hectare, which is relatively low to our neighboring country, China. But the positive sign which we can see today is that India has become rice exporter, and we have exported more than 17.7 metric tons of rice during the past 1 year. And we could earn more than 65,326 crores of foreign exchange because of the export of rice. So now from these statistics, it is obvious that we are now self-sufficient in rice production. But if you see these statistics of rice production, the area of rice, the black bar which you can see here, is almost static or coming down during the past 2 decades. Whereas rice production and productivity has gone up But we have seen now the plateau of productivity during the last decade. In spite of the fact that we grow 1,436 rice varieties, including 127 hybrids in India, which tells that rice can grow in the diverse ecological systems, starting from high yields to below sea level, from sodic soil to acidic soil to saline soils. It can grow in flooded areas and deep waters. So for that agroecological system, we need different types of varieties. And I would like to congratulate our breeders at this particular occasion that we have developed high-yielding varieties for all these agroecosystem. So if we see the current and future demands for rice production in India, now there are certain targets. We are, as I told you, 1.36 billion people in India, which is expected to rise 1.48 billion in 2030, and which will further go higher to 1.62 billion in 2050. So not only the demand for other commodity will increase, but the demand for rice will substantially increase. As told by Dr. Sundaram, we have produced 120 million metric tons during this year, and from a cropped area of 44 million hectares, which will still go down. If you see, it is expected that it will go down from 44 to 42 million hectares in 2030 and 40 million hectares in 2050. So at the one hand, our area is reducing, but on the other hand, our projections for the productions are higher. We have to produce 130 million metric tons by 2030 and 168 million metric tons by 2050. So naturally, then we need to use various new technologies for rice improvement. It's not only the case that our area is reducing. What the rice is being affected by various biotic and abiotic stresses. And this is one of the very important informations which was supplied by Dr. Sundaram to me, that in 1965, we were having only 3 pest and diseases on rice in India. In 1965, 3 pest and diseases, which has now rose up to 19 in 2015. So when we are developing high yielding varieties, due to the global climate change, the climate is becoming very congenial for one organisms and inferior to other organisms. The insect pests are growing along with the improvement in rice. Not only that, we have great challenge of salinity and drought stress because of the global climate change. And we need to develop varieties for these ecosystems. If we want to sustain our yield potential of rice, we have to keep ourselves vigilant and try to see these stresses which are contributing more than 30 to 40% of yield losses every year. So in terms of plant breeding, what are the new breeding technologies which we need? We have great target to achieve 168 million metric tons by 2050. But on the other hand, we do have so many biotic and abiotic stresses which are what we call affecting our rice production. So one of the important technologies which I listed here is plant genomics. And we know that rice is considered as a model crop as far as genomics and genetics is concerned. After Arabidopsis, if I say here with more confidence, then I would say that rice is second to Arabidopsis in terms of understanding its genetics and genomics during the past 25 years. For understanding the genomics, one has to decode the genome sequence of total genome sequence of an organism. And for that, basically, Sanger's dideoxy method was very popular till 2005. And even rice genome was sequenced based on this particular method. But after 2005, pyrosequencing became very, very important, and next generation sequencing technologies, which involves various sequences like Solexa, IronTorrent, PacBio, and Oxford nanotechnology. Depending upon our requirement, we can choose any of these platforms for the decoding of genomes or genome fragment of an organism. These fragments, these platform have become very, very important. But as I tell everywhere that whatever platform or sequencing technology you use for decoding of the structure of DNA, at the end of experiment or sequencing reaction, we will get a string of ATGC, 4 nucleotides, 4 base pairs, placed in different permutation and combination in that string. And that small string of 500 base pairs to 1 kilobases has to then assemble by using computational method. And that method is called genome assembly. And you know that rice genome, a typical example of map-based sequence of any crop plant genome, was decoded in 2005, in which India also participated. We sequenced Nippon ware variety of rice with 388 genome size and predicted more than 37,000 genes. As I told you here, that only Sanger's dideoxy method was used for sequencing this particular genome, in which 30 labs across the globe from different countries and more than 250 authors or researchers were involved in decoding of this genome sequence, which was very tough at that point in time. So now if we see various types of information which is available now on rice genomics, because we have very high throughput approaches like PacBio and Illumina sequences are available with us for decoding of genomes. So in 2005, International Rice Genome Sequencing Project was completed. The paper appeared in Nature, which I saw in my last show, in my last slide. In 2011, resequencing of 50 accessions of cultivated and wild rice species was completed. And another important landmark came with the development of 3K Rice Genome Project, where 3,000 rice genome varieties were sequenced by IRI in 2014, in which varieties from 89 countries were involved. And we have more than 300 land races or varieties from India itself. In 2018, genome sequencing of 13 domesticated wild rice relatives were obtained, and almost all wild species were sequenced along with the Miracle Rice IR8. So likewise, now there is a lot of information which are available in the public domain. But now people are thinking of sequencing 10,000 rice genomes in the coming year to stabilize or to build this particular genome databases further. So all these sequence information on DNA markers, information on QTLs, information on different traits of rice from across the globe are available in all these public databases, which I given in this particular slide. This is a very source if we think of designing any strategy nowadays as far as breeding of rice is concerned. And I will tell you in my subsequent slides how this particular information, the genome sequence information of rice is important. So we have seen that not only genome sequence information is important, but the information related to the genotype of rice are very, very important. And this is a very important resource which we have at Indian Institute of Rice Research, mapping population and near isogenic lines for various traits. And the traits which were talked about right now, yield, phosphorus and nitrogen use efficiency, about which Dr. Pathak and Dr. Parveen Rao also mentioned, water use efficiency. Then high grain iron and zinc content, bacterial leaf blight, blast, sheath blight, BPH, and more than 30 mapping populations are available at Indian Institute of Rice Research. Let me mention here that when we started our work in 1996 and developed a cross of T6 in 1999, at that time there was no population was available in India, mapping population was available in India to map a particular gene of interest. Besides that, we have EMS mutants of BPT5204 and Nagina22 at Indian Institute of Rice Research, as well as at IRI and other universities, those who are involved in its consortium. And genome sequencing and transcriptomics and RNAi, small RNA sequence data is also available at our institute at Hyderabad. And besides that, we were involved in cloning and characterization of more than 20 genes and microRNA at our institute, besides doing pathogenomics and also transcriptome of various pathogens and insects. So 20 years back, probably nobody would have thought that we would be able to not only sequence thousands of rice lines, but also sequence the genomes and transcriptomes of thousands of pathogens, plant pathogens, rice pathogens, and insects. It happened all because of a typical technological advancement which could happen during the past 20 years. So what is the application of rice genomics? Why did we are giving so much emphasis on sequencing rice genome sequence of any organism? In case of rice, after 2005, if you see, more than 3,500 genes from Japonica and 800 genes from indica type of rice have been cloned, characterized, and functionally validated in rice. That's the major advancement. After Rhodopsis, I think this is the most important and significant information which we got from rice. Out of these genes, more than 3,000 are agronomically important rice genes. And these genes are primarily characterized for their role in yield, quality, disease, and pest resistance, nitrogen use efficiency, abiotic stress resistance, and reproductive development. Besides that, we have very important rice gene, more than 39,000 rice genes carrying haplotypes, which haplotype potentials have also been identified. So how we go for mapping of a simple trait? We have two different types of traits broadly. If we classify the simple traits, which are genetically, which are very simple and controlled by one or a few genes, but then complex traits which are controlled by the quantitative trait loci. For mapping and cloning of genes controlling simple traits, all these 8 to 9 steps are used. And those who are involved and those who are geneticists, they know that for mapping a particular gene or QTL, though it's a difficult task, but very rewarding at the end of the project. So for mapping of any traits, whether it is simple or complex, you need to have two contrasting genotypes, which need to identify which contrasting for the trait of interest. And then one has to develop mapping population and then understand its inheritance of the trait, whether the trait is controlled by a single gene or a quantitative trait loci. And according to that, one has to choose a strategy to go about the cloning and characterization gene. Once we understand the inheritance of the traits, then mapping population is used for genotyping by using DNA markers. Then we construct genetic linkage map of that particular loci. And then for cloning, you need a high resolution map of the locus. And once map is known, genetic linkage map is known, then one can easily now construct a physical map with the help of genome sequence information, which is there in public domain, and then subsequently go down to reach to the gene of interest by using map-based cloning approach, doing sequence analysis and functional validation by complementation. Similarly, for the mapping of complex traits, if you see, initially when we started work in 1999 or 1995, below, I think before 2000, all the work which was involving dissecting of complex traits was started with a conventional QTL mapping and linkage mapping, that is developing a mapping population and then looking at the genetics of trait and normal distribution of phenotypes. If it gives, we say, a quantitative trait, controlled trait, and then one has to associate particular genotype with a phenotype and then map the QTL on the genome of an organism. But once the genome sequence become very easy, one has to do meta-QTL analysis based on the sequence information, and one can use, even need not to develop mapping population, one can develop association mapping panel, or natural population can be used for developing core and mini core of a population which represents all the genes present within that population, and then use SNP arrays and also SNP markers for mapping of the trait of interest and look at its association with the trait. So similar like that, we can apply this meta-QTL analysis and then identifying these QTLs by using association mapping panel or mini cores and cores, and then validating those QTL on by parental mapping population. This is one of the examples which I share with you, which we did long time back on a complex trait and developed a mapping population of recombinant inbred lines. And then that recombinant inbred lines was first phenotyped at 3 different locations: at IRI, at Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad, which was Directorate of Rice Research at that time, and National Rice Research Institute, Cuttack. For 2 years, that population was first phenotyped, and then looking at the phenotype of all those places, you can see here in this particular histogram, the phenotypes of this population, when we analyzed, it gives almost a normal distribution, which tells us that there is a quantitative trait loci which is present in rice, controlling the sheath flight resistance in rice. So that's a typical linkage map, QTL map of rice chromosome number 12. And then we identified a QTL QSBR11 on chromosome number 11 of rice, where a major QTL effective against this Rhizoctonia solanae population present in 3 different locations: Delhi, Hyderabad, and Cuttack. This QTL was effective at all 3 locations. And then that QTL was dissected out, and we identified different genes present within the QTL. And we were surprised to see that there were 8 tandem repeats of chitinase genes present within this QTL. And you know that these chitinase genes are responsible for synthesis of enzyme chitinase, which degrades the fungal cell wall, because the Rhizoctonia solani fungal cell wall is made up of chitin and cellulose, and chitin is degraded by these defense response genes, when these expresses and produces chitinase enzyme. Later on, we validated the function of all these genes present within it in vitro system and also in rice itself, but that is not the part of today's presentation. But now, question comes, why we need to map these QTL and single gene for typical traits, simple traits or complex trait? What is the need of mapping these traits? So these traits can be extensively used for marker-assisted backcross breeding or marker-assisted breeding, which is all sitting here, I think, understand, because in rice it has been extensively used, and more than 43 varieties of rice have already been released by using this particular technique, which I will tell later on. But to make this technique simpler to other listener here, we have different chromosomes, and when we map a particular gene, because gene you cannot see from your naked eye, the QTL you cannot see, you can see these genes or QTLs from their phenotype. But when we map these genes and QTL with DNA markers, then DNA markers can be identified by using simple electrophoresis technique or PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And when we find a gene typically linked to a marker, typically linked to the gene of interest or trait of interest, then that particular plant is crossed with the susceptible one. And then this is the way how things are happening. So this is an example which I'm showing here from our own studies, where we mapped PI54 gene on chromosome number 11 of rice. And it very closely spaced marker TRS26 and 33 at 0.7 and 0.5 centimorgan distance. And also derived gene-based markers when the gene was cloned and functionally validated. So to introgress this gene, one has to cross donor, the TTEP line, which you can see here, and the phenotype of this particular line, TTEP, almost completely free from blast, with the susceptible one. This is an example I'm showing here, which we started in 2006. Our colleagues from IRI, Dr. A.K. Singh's group, they started this work when we developed markers. They crossed TTEP with PUSA 1, Basmati 1, and followed these segregating populations with marker-assisted PCR and electrophoresis. So in an electrophoretic pattern on a gel, when the gene is present in a particular plant, in a mapping, in a generation, particular segregating population, if the gene is present here, then you will find band on the gel. And if gene is absent, you don't find a band. It's a very simple method of identifying the segregate. So after following this for subsequent generation, then this particular material is used for developing populations, and that population is further now evaluated at multi-locational trials. And this is an example where I'm showing here, and we evaluated this particular locations at it's a part of NAIP project, and I'm happy to share that Dr. Anand Kumar was our director at NIPB and RCPB New Delhi when we carried this particular work, and that was evaluated across the location, the whole material under NAIP project, and then finally we came out with these very important varieties, and this was. 2 slides were provided by, the first 2 pictures were provided by Dr. A.K. Singh. The variety PUSA 1612, a blast-resistant long-grain aromatic rice variety using marker-assisted selection. There is this Nils of PUSA Sugandh, which contains PI54 and PIG, 2 gene for blast resistance. Similarly, Pusa Basthi 1609 neck blast resistant variety was developed and released by CVRC, which contains PI54 and PIG5, again 2 genes. Then we also developed a variety from a mapping population, which we have now in F19 generation, the population which we started developing in 1999, TTEP into HP2216, that is aimed at 2 different locations. And from that particular population, one of the transgressive segregant, recombinant infrared line 4, which we identified, my partner from Himachal Pradesh Agriculture University, Dr. Rajiv Rathore, he identified this particular line, very good transgressive lines, which shows very good character and contains PI54 and PETA genes. And this variety was released for cultivation in Himachal Pradesh by our breed. So the gene which we mapped in 2005, many of you are aware of this gene. It has become now a sort of story in part of various books. So it has already been introgressed in more than 40 varieties of rice. Starting from 2005, a molecular breeding program was started at ICAR, and the varieties are location specific, starting from J&K to Northeast, then Eastern region, Odisha, and then southern part of the country. Our colleagues from Hyderabad, TNAU, Tamil Nadu Agriculture University, or Kerala. Wherever rice is grown, this gene is now, because this gene is very, very effective to the race flora of different fungal population present in these regions, which we have tested and we have shown very clearly effective gene. But we also always told that this gene has to come with another gene of blast resistance, so that fungus should not get an opportunity to create another virulent strain by breaking the gene, the resistance mechanism of this particular gene. And it has also been used by various private companies in their breeding programs, because the gene, the donor, and all the information is available in public domain. So this is what I was talking now, that by using marker-assisted backcross breeding and marker-assisted selection, I think rice is a crop where maximum varieties have been developed. The reason being that this particular program was started long back, particularly for bacterial leaf blight resistance. Improved Pusa Basthi 1 was the first variety which was released using marker-assisted selection, and improved Samba Masuri, another variety released by our colleagues from Sundaram and his colleagues from Indian Institute of Rice Research, containing 3 genes for BLB resistance. And then not only that, if you see here, even QTL for that has also been introgressed in Swarna, a mega variety of rice. And then Samba Sabban, Samba Masuri was developed by our colleagues from Indian Institute of Rice Research. And similarly, if you see this red color, which I have shown here, all these varieties, I don't want to read each and everything here, but I would like to say that whatever you think today, if you want to introgress 1 gene, 2 genes, 3 genes, or more than even 10 genes in the particular varieties, along with QTLs, we have a technology, marker-assisted backcross breeding, marker-assisted selection, which can be used for developing these varieties. And now I'm happy to share with you that we have released more than 43 varieties of rice containing different traits for disease resistance, for submergence tolerance, for herbicide resistance, low soil phosphorus, salinity tolerance. You name any trait, and we have the variety with us, which has been released by using marker-assisted selection by our breeders. And I would like to congratulate, at this particular occasion, we are the 7th Foundation Day of Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad, and also as a part of Padam Shri SVS Sastri's Memorial Lecture, when I'm telling these development in rice today, it is very hard to believe that India has progressed such a far that we could release so many varieties. And this is a classical example from a slide given by Dr. A.K. Singh, breeding of improving Pusa Basmati and Basmati related varieties for their resistance to VLV and blast. The most important thing not only is introgression of gene of interest, but also the retaining the quality trait, which is the trademark of Basmati type of variety. And in any rice, if you say, not only Basmati, we cannot compromise with the quality of rice while breeding our varieties for various traits. So coming to the third approach, which I was interested to take up today in new breeding approaches, is genetically modified crops, GM approach, and need not to explain here. We have expert like Dr. Anant Kumar sitting here, who has devoted his whole life on transgenic. Basically for the development of transgenic crops, we use two different methods. One is agrobacterium mediated transformation, and another one is bialistic gene gun. And if we see the area under transgenic crop, which was minimal in 1996, and 97 10 million hectare area was under transgenic crops globally, which has now reached 290 million hectares in 2017. And these transgenic crops are being grown in more than 26 countries, including India, where we are growing transgenic cotton. But other than cotton, we are not growing any other crop. But in case of rice, we have a very classical example of golden rice, which has created a history, not only in terms of use of technology in transferring beta-carotene rich genes, developing beta-carotene rich rice, but also how one can make use of basic science, the applied science and molecular biology to develop or modify a trait of interest in case in rice, wherein one can think of quality. Sunflower, it has not been released in India, but Philippines, it has already been released for cultivation. And this transgenic approach was used to develop superior introgression lines with beta-carotene A rich, and by using breeding approaches, this gene was transferred. Not only that, there are various approaches which are used for iron transferring iron-related genes, ferritin genes in rice endosperm, so that we can create rice with more quantity of iron. Iron and zinc has become very, very integral part of our breeding programs, and I am happy to share that we have a consortium CRP project on biofortification, which is again headed by Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad, and very, very important achievements and material which is coming out of this project. We are happy that this material will become very important in the years to come. And similarly, iron biofortification not only can be achieved by transgenic approach, but the QTL approach, and that's the approach we are using in our biofortification program, where genes or QTLs which are present in various wild species or local land races can be introgressed, assisted by cross-breeding in our breeding program for iron biofortification or zinc biofortification. And many varieties of different crops have already been released. In case of rice, even we have many examples. And the first high zinc rice varieties were developed by Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad, DRR Than 45. And after that, then CR Than 310, then CR, and many series of CR Thans and DR Than which were released, which are rich in zinc. And I'm sure that 26 to 28, I'm told that 26 to 28 different lines are different AICRP projects which are coming out of product of biofortification program, which are at the various stages of its release. So now coming to the another approach, which is now I'm going to talk few minutes I will take to describe this particular technology, the genome editing, wherein it's a typical, or I would say the refined method of creating mutation in an individual, be it a plant or any organism. So in case of plants, when we talk about mutation breeding, mostly physical mutations or chemical mutations were applied during 60s and 70s, wherein random mutations were created in the genome, and then through selection one can create a variety. But here, by using CRISPR-Cas9 and other approaches of genome editing, one can change a single base pair of within the genome at the target of interest, and then that change in the gene can change the phenotype. And happy to share that for this particular technique, two lady scientists, Jennifer and Emanuele, they got Nobel Prize in chemistry during last year. And the powerful technology which you see today is not only its application in almost all sphere of biological sciences, but in case of agriculture, now if you see, before the CRISPR-Cas was developed, there were TELEN and other approaches which were available with us. And we have seen that from 2012 products or varieties which have been developed, for example, blight resistant in rice, then herbicide tolerant canola, high yield waxy corn, potatoes with altered starch, non-browning mushroom, virus resistant cucumber, high yielding rice, and gluten-free wheat. All these examples are there in literature, and people are now start using these particular varieties in the farmers' field. The status of genome editing approach in India is also not bad. If you see, in case of, particularly in case of plants, many projects are going on which are funded by either DBT or ICAR or DST on genome editing of different crops. This is the status which I'm showing here, not to take much time, but to give you a classical example here. All these slides were provided by Dr. Viswanathan from IRI New Delhi, so I would like to thank him here. And this is the genome editing in rice for enhancing stress tolerance, National Agriculture Innovation Project, Science Fund project, which was implemented at IRI and ICGV and CRRI Cuttack, and also at IIR Hyderabad. One of the outcome from this particular project is that the loss of function mutant of drought and salt tolerance gene encoding transcription factor, TF transcription factor that confers drought and salt tolerance. So it's why changing single transcription factor with single mutation, we can produce two types of different phenotypes. Varieties tolerant to rice, salt, and variety tolerant to drought. And this is what the examples which is given, and it has already been published by Santosh Kumar and his associate. At IRI, this DST mutant have also been produced and then phenotyped for water use efficiency. And you can see that all these phenotypes are giving phenotyped by using high throughput phenotyping facility here, and very classical data has already been generated by Dr. Viswanathan and his group. And a very interesting example which I got from ICGV, for this is also a product of our National Agriculture Science Fund project, wherein the loss of function mutation of fine culm 1, FC1 or teosinte branched 1 gene increases tillering in rice. The tillering potential of a particular plant was increased with such a high amount that even plant tillers, they absorb the heavy load of the grains. You can see here the examples. It could help, showed 60 to 70% enhanced yield, which probably as a breeder we cannot think of. 60 to 70% higher yield. Not only even with a hybrid one can achieve that. Now, this work is being now carried out, and these all is further followed at IRI and at our institute, Indian Institute of Rice Research, Hyderabad. Similarly, another mutant which was developed in the background of MTU 1010 again at ICGV. And in this particular case, dense and erect panicle DAPI1 gene of G protein and alpha subunit involved in the regulation of number of grains per panicle was used. You can see the number of grains, 55 to 52, 55% higher grain numbers and higher grains per plant, and 25 to 21 to 15% higher yield. So what is the status of hybrid in comparison to these genome edited plants? That has to be studied, and one can see the molecular basis of this heterosis. It's a question for all of us. How, with the single base pair change, the heterosis of a particular plant is increasing such a high number. But unfortunately, again, there are so many regulations, biosafety regulation of genome edited crops. And this is a slide which shows very clearly that the world map here, genome edited plants, edited crops are not regulated as GMO. Because in this case, although you use GM technology, transgenic approach to develop plants, but the product is not transgenic per se. The seed which we are getting is not transgenic. Or even now we have approaches, transgenic approaches, where marker-free plants can be produced, and you can eliminate, totally eliminate the backbone of vector and other Cas vector from CRISPR-Cas vector from the genome of interest. So in all these green colors shows that New Zealand, Australia, North America, Canada, Brazil, etc., that genome edited crops are not regulated as GMO. That's very happy sign. But on the other hand, the yellow color, which you can see here throughout the globe, including India, Bangladesh, the genome editing crops are, the regulations are still in discussion space. And I would like to tell here, people might be thinking that India is not progressing well. But let me tell here that almost have one or other meeting related to regulations of genome edited crops by Government of India. So Government of India is very positive in this particular direction, and I'm sure that after a few discussions, I'm sure that these types of plants will see the light of the day. Whereas the red one, which you can see again, some countries in European Union, they are not liking genome edited crops, and they are treating these just like similar to GMO product. But in this particular case, if you see Far East, Japan, if no foreign DNA is present in these plants, then not regulated as GMO. So that's very healthy sign here. So all these, this particular approach will definitely change the whole landscape of plant breeding in future. And it's a in real sense, it would be a game changer. As I've shown you in one of the examples, the 60% yield increase, hard to believe. But when you see the presentation by scientists and Dr. Reddy, I would like to mention here, Dr. Reddy from ICGV, when you see his presentation, all those plants were almost logical. So one has to think very seriously about this particular approach, and it will be a real game changer in yield potential, increasing yield potential of rice crop. So we have so many good things happening in rice, but you know the future challenges are in front of us. For that, we need to change, to perform midterm correction in our program, and we have to change ourselves as per the need arises. And we need to develop, breed for the improvement of, again, increasing yield, because our target is 168 million metric ton by 2050. We have to increase the nutritional quality in grain, durable for drought, stress resistance, high nitrogen and water use efficiency, I would say nutrient use efficiency and water use efficiency, for which one has to use all molecular tools, the technologies which I have showed today, the speed breeding to facilitate the increase the process of speed of developing different populations and hybrid rice. Then evaluation and identification of germplasm line. This is the target which I have given to all my AICRP colleagues here, that it is very, very important to see the basic aspect of rice. All these micronutrients, why these are not going inside the endosperm. If you see, all these are either lying in aileron layer or pericarp of rice, and we eliminate these while polishing of rice. So I told my colleagues that let us look for a germplasm. I'm sure there will be a genetic variability for in rice germplasm, where we will find rice endosperm rich in iron and zinc that one has to see, which can be very useful for biofortification project. Then development of novel crop production and processing technology for enhancing rice production, improving resource use efficiency and sustainability of direct seeded rice, and increasing profit in irrigated ecosystem in the realm of climate change. I think this particular future target itself takes care of what Dr. Pathak was telling in his remarks, that we need to think of reducing carbon emission or methane emission because of rice cultivation to prevent global climate change. Then application of new technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, sensor, and big data analytics for phenotyping of large population and management of various production and protection technologies. These are the technologies of future, wherein one has to integrate all these IT-related technologies in our ongoing programs. Until as we use these, I think we will be obsolete in our role as a scientist. Then adoption of novel technologies to accelerate the diffusion of rice technologies among farmers and other stakeholders, and to assess their impact assessment. So with these words now, I would like to say that rice is life for all of us, those who are not only sitting here, or those who are not sitting, because around 3 billion people on this globe are dependent on rice. And I would say that there is tremendous opportunity even in rice research, whether you think of basic, applied, or whatever categorization you can think of doing it. We have opportunities, lot of opportunities in all areas or all spheres of rice research. For that, my younger colleagues from Indian Institute of Rice Research, they have to come up with all new technologies. My older colleagues from Indian Institute of Rice Research, they have to act as mentor of younger colleagues. And let us follow the footsteps of our predecessors, Professor E.A. Siddique, those who were stalwarts, those who were involved in developing basmati short duration and dwarf basmati type crop rice, Dr. S.B.S. Sastry, and many our senior colleagues, those who have developed extraordinary material in the rice improvement program, which is now very helpful in reaching crop varieties. So thank you very much. I again wish you all heartiest congratulations on this Foundation Day, and I am sure that Dr. Sundaram has definitely